Hey, how y'all doing? So, I really don't like talking about politics. And plus, I think that most of us want a break from politics. It's just politics shoved into everything all the time. And that's really why I slowed down on making political videos. I don't even really touch political topics anymore. But I feel like something needs to be said. So, we have this issue with Donald Trump being banned from Twitter. And I didn't spaz out as much as everybody else did because they had pretty much told everybody they were going to do this months ago, years ago. They pretty much told people, oh, the moment he's not in office anymore, he's going to get banned from Twitter. It was only a matter of time. It was inevitable. He might have actually gotten banned if he'd have won. It didn't matter. So put that aside. I don't think Donald Trump is going to be bothered. I think a lot of the leftists are upset. They think Donald Trump cares about being banned from Twitter. No, I doubt he cares. Dude is 70 some odd years old. He's a billionaire. He's not tweeting. He's probably going to spend more time on the golf course. His life is perfectly fine. And I think that that's really what bothers them. He's so old and so rich that they can't bother him. So it's not about him, and it's never been about him. This is the one thing that, as a libertarian, I disagree strongly with a lot of Donald Trump's decisions and his policies and different things like that. But there's one thing that he said that was absolutely true. It was never about him. It was always about you, the Trump voter. That's why when the election started to come down and everyone was like, okay, well, Biden won. It went from Trump is the problem to Trumpism is the problem. Now, what is Trumpism? Nobody has any idea. It's something that the media simply made up, just like, and because they made it up out of whole cloth, out of thin air, they can just label anybody as a Trumpist, and your Trumpist positions have to be canceled. And look, we can all live our lives without Twitter. If we get banned from Twitter, so what? That's one thing we need to do is we need to stop pretending that Twitter is the be all end all. Who cares about Twitter? Who cares about Facebook? There are people out there who don't have Twitter or Facebook. Now I get it that social media is a good way to stay informed, but you have to understand that a lot of the people who spend all their time on Twitter have free time to spend on Twitter, right? So, like, that's just kind of how it is. Like, it's mostly people who work in offices and, you know, college professors and political pundits. Most people who work in factories and stuff like that, they don't spend all day on Twitter. So if they were banned from Twitter for 12 hours, that's one a shift. You spent 12 hours in the factory, that's a shift, and that's it. They were like, "Oh, I can't be on Twitter for my shift." So what? So when people are freaking out, understand that most of the people who are freaking out, that is their lifeblood. Twitter is their lifeblood. It's not necessarily yours. It's not necessarily mine. It doesn't mean I don't like Twitter. It's just that uh, it is what it is. Now, another thing is the Republicans lost bigly all over the elections, and it was their own fault. The Republican Party is weak. There is more backbone in a package of ramen noodles than it is in the Republican Party, and that includes Trump, because Trump talked a lot, very tough, and in certain instances he was pretty tough, but he never did anything about big tech censorship when he had the chance. He didn't want to do anything, and that's because that's part of the Republican thing. And let me explain. Um, Republicans is all about hands off, right? They don't really want to regulate, which is the right thing to do. The problem is that often what they don't understand is these companies, they fear competition more than they fear regulation. They can handle regulation because they can navigate it. They can in some cases even sit down and help write it in ways that fuck over their competition. They don't care about regulation. The regulation is fine. They'll take the regulation. What they don't want is the competition, because the competition is something they can't control. You can now, and here's where we come with Parler, right? Twitter can't control Parler, but other people can. So what do? You lean on your friends to lean on them, right? So when you start talking about, and for those who don't know, Parler has become quote unquote right wing Twitter, even though it Parler kind of sucks and it's been around for a long time. But if you want to be honest, the only reason Parler is about to get snatched from Amazon and Google and all these types of places is because it is quote unquote right wing Twitter. You don't need to know anything about it. That's all you need to know is that it's right wing Twitter, and that's enough to get it banned. People don't like competition. That's what's wrong with these companies. That's why all of them, the NBA is kneeling. Under Armour, Ben and Jerry's, everybody who's coming out supporting Black Lives Matter or the woke capitalists. It's really fascism. If you really want to be straight up honest with it, like if you want to get to the heart of it, that's what it is. You look at Benito Mussolini's pure definition of fascism, right? Everything within the state, nothing outside of the state. Basically, the state is involved with everything, right? When people were complaining about big tech censorship, conservatives being banned off Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, yada, 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 what they should have done is not throw Jack Dorsey in jail. That's ridiculous. Not even sign any laws. What they should have done is they should have cut off the money. That's what you can't tell me that Twitter does not have government contracts. They do. Facebook has government contracts. Cut them off. Force competition. Say, okay, well, you guys might be the biggest, but you're biased, so we're not going to deal with it. We're going to give a contract to your competition. They would have changed. Their behaviors would have changed. Now, I'm not in favor of giving contracts to private corporations in most instances at all. Even though I do believe it is necessary and it's probably better for a private company to do it than the government. But in this instance, where you have all of these private industries bottlenecked in two places, essentially New York and California, you're going to have people pressing New York and California values upon the rest of the country. This is something Jason Whitlock was talking about. And it's something that I firmly believe. You don't hear about Idaho and Nebraska and Wyoming in the news for a reason, right? Everything that you see, everything that they think is important is because New York, Washington, D.C., Chicago, and California think so. They don't care what you think, what's going on in Arkansas or Missouri. They don't give a damn. Does it offend Californians? Does it offend New Yorkers? Does it offend the DC elites? If it offends them, then it matters. That's why, storming the cathedral, as Eric July has started calling it, the whole running into the Capitol building. That's why that bothered them so much, because that's their church, right? You can burn down any private business you want. Oh, they just got insurance. But you stepped foot into their cathedral. Even though the Women's March has stormed the Capitol before, Black Lives Matter has stormed the Capitol before. And, and I'm not even fully on board with a lot of those people being Trump supporters that did that stuff. I'm being a conspiracy theorist. I'm not even on board on that. Because just because I wear a Chicago Bulls jersey doesn't mean I play for the team. Any asshole can go put on a Trump hat and then go do something crazy. And then people are like, it's a Trump supporter. It's like, okay, whatever. Whether they did or they didn't is not the point with me. My point is the rules are so askew that there is no way to have people be treated fairly. Like I said in that Mia Yim video, it's only a riot when you do it. When the people we don't like do something, it's a riot. When the people we do like do something, it's a protest. And once you understand that the left is going to change the language, no matter what you do, they're going to change the language, right? They're going to always soften the blow. They write books called In the Defense of Looting. And then when the looting starts the other way, Oh no, you're a terrorist, right? See, when you call left wing activists who call for violence, who attack people, when you call them terrorists, us no, they're freedom fighters. They care about their civil rights. But when you care about your civil rights to be left alone, to not have the government hand in your pocket all the time, well, you're a terrorist. And then something simple. As it's amazing how crazy that is, right? That's something as simple as wanting to be left alone. For the government to leave you alone and not take money out of your pocket and not try to pump your kids full of drugs or teaching them degenerate shit. How this stuff is all so controversial. It's controversial to not want somebody to take a piece of money that you worked for. That's a controversial decision. It's controversial to go to the ballot box and say, you know what? I think if I worked for $15 an hour, I should get $15 an hour and not 13 and not 12, not 10, but 15 because that's what I worked for. And it wouldn't matter if it was 15, 25, 35, or 5. If I agreed to work for $15 an hour and I'm not getting a $15 an hour check, that should be a problem. But that's a controversial decision. It's a controversial decision to decide that you don't want to chip in on a broken education system. It's controversial. And that's why these people hate you. They hate you because they see that some people are self-sufficient and other people are not. And nobody is perfectly self-sufficient, not even the rich. They still rely on people. Everybody relies on everybody, but nobody should be able to force you to provide for them. And this goes in every single way. No, we should not be forced to give money to Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or any other organization who are going to abuse their authority. And yes, I am of the opinion that these, when they did it to Alex Jones, when they got together to ban Alex Jones, it was an antitrust issue. All of these competing agencies got together, worked together, collaborated on their terms of service. They all have similar terms of service that they all decided at the same time and then decided to all ban Alex Jones at the same time. You cannot tell me that was one big old coincidence. It wasn't a coincidence. They did it on purpose. But it was a test to see if somebody was going to sue. And they didn't. So now they're doing it to Trump. And now they're going to do it to you. You're not going to have the money to fight it. And Trump probably don't care. So it's going to take for somebody to sue. And it might end up being Parler or Gab or one of those, quote unquote, right-wing websites or something like that who got throwaway money in order to do this sort of thing. But it's nonsense. It's never been about Trump. It's always been about the Republican voter. There is no Republican, none, nowhere, that is not a Nazi or fascist to the people who call everybody Nazis and fascists. When was the last time they said a Republican wasn't a fascist? I believe I had this conversation with y'all before, right? Never. They call Mitt Romney one of the most milquetoast individuals in the world, a guy who stabbed Trump in the back for all to see as many times as possible. He's still stabbing and trying to get people to think he's a good guy. It's not working. They called him a Nazi. They said he was a right-wing fascist. They said George Bush was a fascist. The fact of the matter is, the country has fascist tendencies, of course, because the right doesn't do what the right says they're going to do. And this is what I mean by they're weak. Now, you may have said, what do you mean the Republican Party is weak? The Republican Party is anti-Board of Education. Why do we still have a Board of Education? Because they're not strong enough to tear it apart. Why do we still have an ATF and the Republican Party hates the ATF? Because they're not strong enough to tear it apart. Why do we still have All of these agencies that the Republican Party says are unconstitutional, they still exist because they're not strong enough to destroy them. They don't have the nerve. And you know why Donald Trump lost? Because they don't have the nerve to destroy that system. They don't have the gall. See, the system is pretty damning, right? Because the system is a patronage system. In other words, these people help you there's people out there who will give you money. They'll help you get a job. Betsy DeVos, Linda McMahon, for instance, they help get Trump in office. Therefore, the patronage system says you have to give them something in return. So you give them a job. But you give them a job in a facility, in an institution that you don't believe should exist. The Small Business Association or whatever, the Board of Education, the Department of Education, it should not exist. And yet, you need it in order to fulfill your obligations to your patrons, the people who gave you money. So this system Trump was failed from the beginning. The whole drain the swamp thing, the bureaucrats just sat on their hands. We don't have to do anything. You could probably pay attention to some stories of Trump wanted something done. The bureaucrats were like, we feel like it. Can't fire them. They're unionized. Didn't know that, did you? A lot of them people didn't know. A lot of people don't know that there's all these federal bureaucrats are unionized. Can't fire them. Can't get rid of them. So the system is entrenched. This is the problem with the swamp. This is why the swamp can't change. Because there are so many people who outlive any president. That was actually the point of the whole system, was that there be an apparatus that can operate without even as government changes. But what ends up happening is those people, when somebody leaves, other people just bring in their people. Like Biden's going to bring in his whole team just to replace Trump's team. And that's it. That's it. The engine just keeps on chugging. Nothing changes. Nothing changes. So you can't break the system. And if you ain't got the balls to break the system, you got to have balls to tell all these people, look, we're done. We're not funding the IRS. The IRS is done. We're not funding the ATF. The ATF is done. We're done with it. We're not doing it. The Department of Education, done. We're not funding it. It's over. We're shutting it down. They don't have the guts. That's what I mean by the Republicans are failures. And the Republicans are weak. They could have done this stuff at any point in time in history. They could do it at the state level if they wanted to. And they don't. They don't. They could abolish things like the minimum wage at the state level. They don't. Because they're weak. They figure, oh my God, if I actually do this, I'll never win another election. They care more about elections than they do about policy, being right, about the people that they're supposed to be governing. And since that's the case, you'll always end up in this situation. It's headed for a collapse. I don't mean it's going to collapse in 5 years or 6 years or anything like that. It's going to collapse eventually because all things collapse. I mean, so that just doesn't make it. So I'm right by default. But when you look at a system that nobody is willing to change because everybody benefits from it, and that can't be changed because even an attempt to change it will be slow and grinding because you have to go through the courts. You don't have the authority to just wholesale kill an entire arm of the government. Because if you could, people probably would have done it by now. Or they would have tried to. It's not going to work. So my thing is, when it comes to this whole Biden thing, it's not really even Biden I'm worried about. I'm not even concerned about him. He's a doddering old man. It is the people that he empowers. I've always said that. Because he's going to let the real in. He's going to be there maybe for a short time. trying to hold people back, hold the crazy socialists back. But he's going to give them what they want. He's going to give them the fight that they want. And the fight that they want is to shove through draconian law, completely changing the entire system. Things like universal health care, things like universal unions, stuff like that. They're going to try to ram that shit through. And now they've got all three branches of the government. The only chance that you have is the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court is weak because it's full of weak conservatives. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? The only thing that you got, see, you can't succeed anymore. Can't separate. They're not going to let you separate. And they're going to force themselves upon you. They're leaving their, and then they say you can't talk. They're going to ban you from Twitter. They're going to ban you from Facebook, ban you from YouTube, ban you from everywhere. They're leaving you with one option. They're only leaving you with one option. It was never about Trump. It was never about Trump because it doesn't matter what they did to Trump. Trump can live without Twitter and Facebook. It doesn't matter. It's always about getting to you through him. He was just, oh, look what we did to him. We did that to the president. We banned the president from Twitter. Now, all these other people who call for violence on Twitter directly, Colin Kaepernick, for instance, other types of professors that had tried to excuse violence, they didn't get banned. Funny how the rules only matter when certain people break the rules. And that's the system that you're going to be living. That's a real totalitarian system. That's a real fascist system. When it doesn't matter what you did, it matters who you are when you did it. There was a paper. It was called Velvet Totalitarianism. And he talked a lot about that. That hate speech isn't something that is, and he was a Canadian. It was before Jordan Peterson, a psychologist who came out before Jordan Peterson. And he says, hate speech was defined by who said it, not what was said. It's only hate speech if white men say it. It's only hate speech if a white woman said it. If a black woman and a white woman said the same thing, it's only hate speech because the white woman said it. You're going to be living in that type of system. And if you think, well, I'm black, I don't have to worry about that. It's like, yeah, but watch out. Because blacks have a history of saying stuff about not just about white people, which other white people will accept. But black people have a thing about gays, especially black men. They have a real problem with the gays. You will get banned. You got a real problem with the Jews or the Latinos. You will get banned. And the black women, same thing. See, they have that stack, that stupid ass, what they call it, the progressive stack, where you can only offend people above your station in the progressive stack, or below your station, or something, however that works. So unless you're a one-legged tranny Cambodian, there's people that you can't talk about without getting hit with the ban hammer. You might not know it because you might feel free because you get the power to complain about Whitey, or you get the power to complain about all of these, Whitey, because that's the only people you really can complain about. Then, oh, well, you feel like you're on top of the world. And then you see two men kissing in a cartoon and you're like, what the fuck? I don't want my kids seeing that. Boom, banned. Like, oh, a lot of these people, they sound like they're Jews in CNN. Banned. Oh, boy. Now, me, I don't care. I don't care. Ultimately, Twitter is going to kill its own user base. And this is one of those things that to wrap it up on social media. Politicians are the lifeblood of Twitter. If Republicans wanted to end Twitter, all they had to do was shut it down. Every Republican congressman should leave Twitter. They all should just leave. Just imagine what would happen if you woke up tomorrow and there are no Republicans on Twitter. All the Republicans decided to leave. Cruz, Paul, everybody just decided to leave. How smart would that be? That would be massively intelligent. All the Republicans have to do is leave, and they won't do it. And that should tell you something. That should tell you something. They should have done it a long time ago. I was suggesting that a long time ago. Like, you know how Trump can really damage Twitter? By instead of people threatening him by, we're going to take your page away, we're going to take your page away, he should have just said, fuck you, I'll leave. And shut it down on his own. Shut it down. And then put out a memo telling everybody else they have to shut theirs down too. Like, nope, we're not using Twitter. Shut it down. Twitter's engagement would have fell off a fucking cliff. Facebook next. Shut it down. And all you had to do was these people make content off the stuff that you tweet, off the stuff that you post on Facebook. Leave those sites. Leave them. Make them have to actually do some legwork in order to hear what you said, in order to read what you said. Sure. I mean, but if you got an email service or something like that, you can still keep in contact with the people that you want to talk to. But you're in the shadows. Sometimes it's better to be in the shadows. And I think a lot of us anonymous folks who operate on the internet anonymously, we know that it's better to be in the shadows. But if you're a congressman or something like that, you're too used to being out in front. You're too used to seeing your name in the newspaper and your face on TV, and you want to be out there, and because you want to campaign later. Again, it comes back to that whole selfishness, right? You don't want to fix the problem. You don't want to fix the problem. If I was a Republican, that would have been the first thing I would have tweeted. The first time they said, we're going to ban Donald Trump from Twitter, I'd have been like, okay, do it. And I'm going to suggest every Republican leave the site at the same time. And we're going to leave it all to the progressives and the leftists on this site by themselves. They eat themselves alive. And that's what you want. That's what you want. Because that's what's going to happen anyway. And that's what I think mostly the Biden presidency is going to be. It's going to be the crazy AOCs constantly pushing for insane shit. And Joe Biden's going to be trying to pick and choose which of these insane ideas he's going to throw the bone to. Because she's not going to be able to get all of it. But she's going to get enough. She's going to get enough to jack the prices up, to cause inflation, to jack up taxes. I mean, we already going to have crazy inflation because of these fucking stimulus checks. So we got enough problems. Donald Trump being banned from Twitter ain't one of them. It's not it. I don't care about Trump being banned from Twitter. Hell, it's better for his mental health for him not to be on Twitter. Hell, it's better for my mental health for me not to be on Twitter. I think a lot of people are too attached to their Twitter accounts. But I do believe that if you really wanted to change Twitter, all they had to do was leave and cut off the money. Because if you don't believe that social media is sitting around here collecting paychecks from the federal government, you are naive. Of course they are. But they knew that they wouldn't have the balls to do it. And then if they did have the balls to do it, the bureaucrats would probably slow drag the process. And since you can't fire them for incompetence, it'll never actually get done. That's a beautiful system, isn't it? You're damned if you do. You win if you lose, and you win if you win. If you lose, well, I still got enough people in place, and I got the right laws in place that nothing matters. But if I win, then I could just make better laws for myself, stronger laws for myself, and there it is. Federal agencies are absolutely a mess. And, you know, the states are not that much better, but at least there's a smaller unit of government. This is a problem. It's bigger than Donald Trump getting getting kicked off Twitter is an ingrained issue. The Republican weakness of wanting to be accepted by leftists and Democrats is a problem. They're kiss asses. They're weak. There are no good Republicans. I agree with the leftists on that one. There aren't any. There are some smart ones. There are some who understand uh, when you need to have free markets, you need to have low taxes and stuff like that. But when it comes down to it, all you really need to do is trigger their emotions, and they flip on a dime. Not everybody wants to control Twitter. It's like, no, don't do that. Here's what you do. You just tell everybody to leave. You fuck with Twitter's money. You introduce competition. You say, okay, look, this is what they want to do. We're leaving. It's not okay where we're gonna use Parler and Twitter. It's like, no, we're gonna leave Twitter. Leave it in a dust. We're gonna shut it down. Shut it all down. And if somebody works for you, tell them to shut it down. Shut off your Twitter account. Everybody's going to shut off their Twitter account. We're all going to go dark. And let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. Now, me personally, because I use my Twitter account to tweet about wrestling and stuff like that, I really don't care. I know some other people might. Some people did have Twitter accounts. They shut them down. Some people got banned. Sorry if you got banned, 'cause I know that sucks. I was banned for a little while, but like I said, I found it to be a lot better after I got banned. But it's bigger than Trump getting banned from Twitter. This is big. This is a big story. But you just have to understand that these companies, they fear competition more than they fear regulation. They don't want the competition. They know for a fact that if you get rid of the regulation, the competition grows. That is a fact, you know, and that's all you need to do. That's all. If you know that, then you know why they side with Joe Biden. There's so many corporations have decided to side with Joe Biden and Black Lives Matter because it's easier to throw the Negroes a bone by hiring black women and black men in these token positions. It's easier to do that than to see the competition rising. Because once the competition starts rising, you start losing market share, then that's harder to control. It's easier to control. It's easier to demand that a smaller company have to fit your big company standards. That's hard to do. That keeps small companies small. Okay? So the reason why Twitter banned Donald Trump is because they knew that if they didn't, somebody else was going to try to do something, and it's probably going to try to compete with them. So they gave their user base what the user base wanted. The user base wanted Donald Trump banned 2 years ago. They just finally found a reason to do it. They created a reason to do it. Okay? They did it. Now what? It go from him to other people. From Trump to Trumpism. That's the thing. From Trump to Trumpism. What does that mean? It means nothing. Doesn't mean anything.